All right, Madam Chair, when you're ready.
Thanks. Okay, so we'll call the meeting to order and I'll just read the land acknowledgement. So on December 11th, 2023, we acknowledge that the sacred land on which Smith Falls is now located has been a site of human activity for over 10,000 years and is rich in Indigenous history. This land is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation. We are grateful to the Algonquin ancestors who cared for the land and water in order that we might meet here today. We are also grateful to the Algonquin people for their contribution in the making of the Rideau Canal, which runs through Smith Falls. We are mindful of broken covenants and the need to reconcile with all our relations. Together, may we care for this land and each other, drawing on the strength of our mutual history of nation building through peace and friendship, being mindful of generations to come. So, do we want to review the agenda at this point? Or?
Sure.
Okay.
Motion to approve.
Approved. Second. Okay.
Seconder.
Do we have a seconder?
Yep.
Okay, sorry.
I will.
And thirder. Okay, and the adoption of the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Motion to
Yeah,
approve?
there is a mistake in the minutes.
Is there?
Yeah, Carl was sick last time, so he was not at the meeting. The minutes recorded he was there. Was it?
Oh,
Okay.
Yeah. So just
There's a
that
correction?
that,
Approve it
yeah.
with that
Okay.
correction? Okay. Any other? No?
I think so.
Okay. Approved with that change, that correction? Okay.
Sure.
Sean? You need a second for that?
Yep.
Okay. Peter again?
Yeah.
Okay. Peter, either one? Okay. So any disclosure of monetary interest? No, I see none. And then did we want to step down to the priority issues first? Is that what we were suggesting?
Yes, if you don't mind rearranging
Yeah.
the agenda.
Okay.
I think
So we'll go through the first item, climate lens introduction and discussion.
We'll probably
That's related to the presentation, is it
Yeah,
not?
yeah.
So we'll skip over that one and go to the draft downtown core design guidelines update. Is that you, Carl?
That's Richard, but Richard's just stepped out for a second, so
Okay. Do we want to go to the next one?
you can jump down to the next one.
Okay. So vegetation retention policy approaches. Nothing if not agile, right?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm just following up on just a request and some discussion and throwing a potential policy approach here for committee's consideration. And that is, as part of the working group's mandate, part of our role is to assess policy options to promote best practices for climate protection, climate mitigation. And one of those is vegetation protection. So I think there's retaining trees both on private property and public property. There's obvious benefits in terms of minimizing the heat island, absorbing carbon, and so on that local basis, but also it helps to mitigate, absorbs runoff and helps to mitigate significant stormwater impact. So in 2021, Council had adopted a tree canopy preservation vegetation enhancement policy. So that created some expectations for municipal operations on town land in terms of replacement of trees within municipal road allowances and on parks. It created some expectations for site plan approvals and subdivision approvals. So for instance, if we're negotiating a landscaping plan, it gave us some things that we'd be looking for, basically implementing policies in our official plan. It also set out some best practices to assist both the private sector in our community and public sector in terms of making decisions about tree selection, tree treatment, maintenance, and so on, but also more broadly supported the development of relationships with other agencies and organizations. So what it did not do is regulate tree placement and vegetation on individual properties. So when we're looking at site plan and subdivision approvals, that doesn't come up a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. And if somebody has a treed lot or even just a few trees on their property, there's nothing in the tree canopy policy that speaks whatsoever to that activity. So it was suggested that staff have a look at sort of potentially the next phase, a more regulatory approach that ultimately council will need to provide direction on. So our official plan does include a policy that to mitigate potential impacts due to site alteration or tree cutting, council may adopt appropriate bylaws to prohibit or regulate the placing, dumping, removal, or regrading of topsoil or fill, or the destruction and injuring of trees. So our official plan is our broad guiding policy document that informs council's decision on development, informs council's decision on works and other municipal actions, so that it allows us, it doesn't require us, but it allows us to pass additional policies as council sees fit to address either site alteration or tree removal. So this report assesses a couple of options that are sort of flow from that official plan policy. So the first one is the individual or urban tree removal. So some municipalities, the City of Ottawa being an obvious local example, have enacted regulations prohibiting or restricting the removal of distinctive trees on private lots. So what that means is that a distinctive tree is defined, say 30 centimeters at breast height or some other number, and then those trees cannot be removed unless the city approves a permit. And then there's a process, supporting documents that have to go through and be done to assess that, and then a permit is issued, and then potentially the tree gets removed. So there's a number of different approaches that can happen. Some municipalities that regulate individual tree cutting have different, they balance sort of the ecological advantage of trees versus the climate benefits. So for instance, they may look at a tree that provides a climate benefit, such as a Norway maple or a Manitoba maple or some other invasive or non-desired tree, but is less valuable in terms of its overall ecological function, or it could be something that if placed in the wild can spread and create different other impacts. So council can look at protecting certain trees or making it easier to remove other undesirable trees. Those options are out there. At the end of the day, tree cutting bylaws for individual lots are more common in larger municipalities where there's a different development pressure. So I think council's going to balance the sort of the ecological considerations versus the private property rights and interests of individual residents on their own property. So that's an option that council can explore. What some municipalities, including some of our neighbors such as Perth and Carleton Place and other smaller municipalities have done is adopt clear cutting policies. So looking at private properties, but larger private properties. So not looking at just simply the removal of somebody's tree that's getting in the way of a shed or something that they want to build, but looking at half-acre lots or acre lots or larger lots that are forested, and establish restrictions on tree removal on those larger properties. And that's often, the focus on that is often on development. So for instance, if a developer is looking to file a subdivision approval or a site plan approval on a forested lot, then typically to support that application, they're going to have to do environmental studies. The environmental study is going to have to will likely come up with some mitigation recommendations, some tree preservation plan that would need to be implemented through the plan, maybe some mitigation to mitigate the impact on the natural heritage systems, and then those conditions get implemented as conditions of development approval. However, if they clear the site before any planning application is contemplated or submitted, then there's really no mechanism to enforce that. And a lot of communities have sort of seen that happen. Like the town of Perth, for instance, I believe their tree cutting policy came in because somebody cleared a couple of acre lot, and then council thought, well, let's have a look at to do that. So the bylaws may still allow the removal of individual trees for a variety of reasons on those lots, while still protecting the overall integrity of the woodlot. If the larger property is being used as a Christmas tree farm or some sort of other operational or fundamental land use parameter, then that exception can certainly be in there. But a tree cutting bylaw of that nature is a tool that council can consider using to sort of put that, to assess and evaluate these proposals before a planning application is submitted. Enforcement is obviously the matter that needs to be looked at. If somebody clears a tree and gets a fine, if money is no object, then that's simply the cost of doing business. So those are the sorts of things that need to be looked at. A site alteration bylaw is a third approach, and that's where we're getting into actually the lower level vegetation and regrading and that sort of thing. So site alteration refers to the placement of fill or topsoil on the land, the removal of topsoil, or the alteration of the slope of a piece of land. It's done to remove drainage, create noise berms, stabilize slopes, or prepare land for development. And it's a normal part of any process. And if done through a planning act, if there's a planning act process, a subdivision or site plan approval, then typically the site alteration is regulated, and there's grading and drainage plans, stormwater management plans that are enforced as part of the approval. And that protects neighboring properties. It protects municipal infrastructure. So we're not looking at roads potentially being flooded out or neighbors seeing erosion washouts on their properties. If it's done on an unrestricted basis, then there is less of that. That protection in there. So site alteration and advanced development approvals can have serious implications for adjacent properties if it's not done right. So the Municipal Act allows us to look into that and regulate site alteration for the benefit of protecting the natural environment, human health, and infrastructure. And site alteration bylaws are pretty common across the province, both in rural municipalities where they look at agricultural land protection, as well as urban municipalities. So just about any site alteration bylaw is going to specifically state things like gardening, landscaping, like just minor works that people do on their property. They're exempt. There's certainly there's little public interest or gain or benefit to regulating that, and certainly staff would be recommending council build in those exemptions to any site alteration bylaw. However, it does give that opportunity for us to have a look at soil contamination, look at grading and drainage impacts on a much larger scale. So so those are sort of the three policy approaches that council can look at if we're looking at site alteration, vegetation protection on a climate lens, and they can be adopted together, or we can pick basically one, two, or three of those if we wanted to. So implementation, methods of implementation enforcement, obviously those are important considerations in any bylaws. As I stated, there is the ability for us for a permit for tree removal or site alteration to be supported, say, by an environmental impact study, appropriate supporting documentation. The challenge, of course, is if we establish this permitting regime, then that is going to establish certainly a resourcing constraint in terms of having the appropriate staff and technical expertise to review the application, to enforce the application, and then to sort of follow up to make sure that everything complies. So that would need to be considered, and which department is responsible for that would need to be looked at that. I think another significant challenge in achieving the objectives, and this is where we might need to be a little bit sort of creative and maybe thinking outside the box. From what we've heard from developers over the years, it is often easier to clear and grade a site and then plant little trees, replacement trees later. It gives them a blank slate to work at, and the trees get planted later. So I think one thing that certainly in working with our partners in the development industry, I'd be interested to explore if there's any other best practices or ideas that can be put in place that make it easier or more economical in the first place to protect the tree rather than simply remove trees later on. I don't know the answer to that question at this point, but certainly if staff are directed to bring forward a policy on this, I think our best interest is to assess these questions and ultimately find a fit that works, that makes it or supports developers in retaining vegetation as much as possible. So not just the regulatory approach, but if there's any other sort of, we would need to have a look at that. So I think at this point, this report is respectfully provided for the working group's information and consideration. So there isn't a recommendation coming out of this staff report, but the group may elect to provide a recommendation to town council regarding the subject, and if so, we welcome any additional information or feedback that the working group wishes to provide. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Peter?
Thank you, Carl. I was going to suggest, Madam Chair, if we could go back, because we have a guest speaker and I think everything's working now, and pick back up with Carl's conversation after.
Sure.
Is that
Does that work for everyone?
sure?
Okay.
Oh, this is working.
Okay. Congratulations for getting all of that together.
Yes, I apologize. So thank you for that, everyone. But yes, whenever you're ready, Bob, and I'm going to, Sue, are you okay? I think, sorry, Madam Chair, do you mind if we does everybody need full screen for the presentation? Or would you prefer to see Sue so that she can chime in?
I can't see it.
Yeah, I was gonna say if Sue can just speak when she needs to, because we won't see her waving her hand. So
Perfect, thank you.
I'm fine with that. Yes.
thanks, Sue.
Okay, sit down, guys.
It'll change momentarily.
Slideshow.
How do I get rid of? Oh, I got, that's just for
Yeah.
me. Okay. Sorry, I mean, in addition to my computer not working and then this computer not working, and now I'm on a non-Mac, which since 1983, I've been on a Mac exclusively. So I may be requesting some help here. So today's an auspicious day for this discussion, for this group meeting. It's the 8th anniversary of the Paris Accord, the signing of the Paris Accord, 8 years ago today, December 12th. 194 countries around the world all signed the declaration, which also today is being debated intensively right now as we speak in the middle of the night in Dubai, trying to come up to grips with are we serious about all this as a community of nations. I'm afraid what the answer is going to be, we'll maybe find out tomorrow or the next day. Anyway, I'm going to talk about climate lens, which I think you're probably familiar with the general idea. All municipalities, people work through lenses. It might be the lens of your official plan or zoning regulations. In Perth, it's heritage. They look at things from heritage as well. But everybody looks at things from a budget, sort of how does whatever you do in the municipality affect the budget? Does it meet the budget? Does it work or not work? Climate lens is the same thing, only it's with a carbon budget. And it's just how does every action that we do affect carbon that in our activities? So if you think of it that way, and municipalities who are further along in this have a climate action plan, which basically defines their carbon budget and says this is where we are now, this is where we want to go, this is how we want to get there, and then you want to track that, and that's where a climate lens comes in. So it's a way of assessing the greenhouse gas, that's the GHG, impact of any activity, whether it's a procurement or a policy, tender, any decision of council. Virtually everything we do has a climate impact somewhere, directly or indirectly, but some are bigger than others. What a climate lens does acknowledges that any action from the municipality can impact either positively or negatively on greenhouse gas emissions. Climate lens is used as an ongoing process to track the changes over time. Are our actions increasing our climate budget, or is it decreasing the climate budget? It can be used during procurement to identify the least greenhouse gas options, as well as the fiscally least options. it becomes a line item on all reports to council. So a report, just like it says what the effect is on the budget or the sustainability plan or whatever other, it says how does this affect, raise it or lower. The thing it doesn't do is impose any decision making, of course. It's just information. It's just saying this is the impact, the implications of this action. So locally, the town of Perth, Tay Valley Township, and Lanark County are all currently using a climate lens. Town of Perth for several years, but it's just in the last year they've sort of made it more structured and formal. Tay Valley Township has one. And an interesting addition just this past council, they passed 2 resolutions because it was finding the limitations of the climate lens. And one was to apply a lifetime costing to any decision making. So it's not just what's the upfront cost, what's the lifetime cost of that decision. And the second was even if some things cost more upfront but save money over time, paying that money up front may have gone over the budget, and councillors there did not like going over the budget. So I passed another resolution to use the reserves when needed, to draw from reserves to put that supplement money if required. And then
alert from calendar, CNL newsletter, social media.
Sorry.
So, and repay that over time with the savings of that particular action. So that was an interesting couple things that Tay Valley did with this. Lanark County just recently passed in the last couple of months their climate action plan that they've been working on for a couple of years. And they put up the climate lens as the #1 goal, that it's sort of the umbrella that everything works under. How does it work? Basic level, you just ask any process, does it tend to increase or decrease the climate impact? So that's sort of a qualitative. And then the question is, can those changes be quantified? Can we actually identify how many kilograms of CO2, carbon dioxide per year would this action increase or decrease? Often this can be requested in procurements. That's becoming standard in federal and other RFPs and tenders. And there are tools and information that can be found online to help quantify this. For example, if you're resurfacing a road, you can go online and say, well, do we use new material or do we recycle the material? Other options. And you can go online and find tools that tell you the greenhouse gas difference between the different implications. Some of them you can put in how far are you from the source of material, how far are you from the landfill, and take into consider transportation. So there's a lot of tools being developed out there. And I'm going to present just one sort of smaller tool called the Climate Lens model that has been developed to quantify the impacts. So the tool just tries to bring a lot of useful information together in one Excel spreadsheet. It has basic emission factors, sample actions, which household, business, municipality, community might be involved with, and their impact on greenhouse gas. And then a number of mini tools that allow for more detailed analysis of specific actions. And I'll just, I guess you can see that fairly well. So the first sheet of this, you have basically electricity, for every kilowatt hour of electricity, it generates in Ontario on average 0.017 kilograms of CO2. So that's just a standard number, which will change over time depending on the mix, if we add more natural gas and that sort of thing. Natural gas, for every cubic meter, it generates 2.38 kilograms of CO2. Fuel oil, 2.76 kilograms for every liter. Propane, wood. So these are direct fuel applications. You burn a fuel, it creates this CO2 into the air. There's a lot of other things we do which there's indirect. For example, composting or recycling, water use. They all have a climate change impact which can be quantified. And so this chart sort of identifies some of those. For example, if you set the second line down, a gas moor, for every 10 hours, it generates 48 kilograms of CO2. 2 lines below that, electric mower generates 0.26 kilograms. So you can compare one to the other, going electric or going gas, and so on. So there's a lot of these different things. Air travel right at the bottom. Every kilometer you travel generates, on average, about a 1/4 kilogram of CO2. So now I'm going to just go to the next one, which is, if we can get there, yeah. And I want to go into the first one. So this is the model that looks at the emission factors, and we've gone through some of these, and then it takes those and it ties it in with the second sheet, which is sample actions, and it looks at actions, typical actions at home. Having, say, a fan instead of air conditioning, it can save 270 kilowatt hours, which is 5 kilograms of CO2. So there's different things. Fuel savings. For every lawnmower, for every 10 hours, it generates 48 kilograms of CO2. I'm just going to fly through this because I sent a copy of this before, and the community or the town has access to that, all these, because it goes through a lot of, heat savings, hot water savings, what happens when you insulate your tank or turn off, do a cold wash or quick shower, that sort of thing. Other activities, pool covers, buying local, recycling savings, composting, grass cycling, recycling, water savings, actions taken typically at school or work, such as buying an energy efficient copier, recycled paper, that sort of thing, telework, and so on. So there's a lot of sort of sample actions. So I'm just going to go really quickly through this, but the next one is the mini tool. I think I can make that a little bigger. There, didn't even bigger yet. Yeah. Okay, so this has common, when you go in, energy can be done as BTUs or kilowatt hours or gigajoules and all that. This tries to simplify it. So depending on how you get it, these are the conversion factors. So you see the different fuel sources under the conversion. So the top is natural gas. And if you look over for every cubic meter, the second last column there, the kilograms of CO2, does that highlight this? If I click on that now. Anyway, so every cubic meter of natural gas you burn generates 63.8, sorry, this is for every gigajoule of natural gas that you burn, generates about 64 kilograms of CO2. Every gigajoule of oil is a little more polluting, it's almost 72 kilograms, but every gigajoule of electricity is only 4.7 kilograms. Are people following this? Am I going, yeah, that's okay? Yeah, okay. If could do it interactive, that would be great. But so you can see these are the sort of the common figures. So you can see different fuels have a different impact for the same amount of energy. So some are more efficient than others from a greenhouse gas point of view. So then it's tied in with this, what's called the CO2 calculator. So for natural gas, a typical household would probably burn about 2,500. Now, how do I change this? It should change when I type into it. How do I type a number into that? Yeah, but if I go 25, that should change.
Should, but it's not.
You don't have access to the program.
Anybody know how to use a computer?
You don't have access to the program. It doesn't work because we don't have. There's no subscription.
We don't have a subscription on this, so it's not interactive. We don't have Microsoft Office, I guess, down the road. If you type in 25 there, essentially,
if you type in 25 here, it will automatically give you how many kilograms of CO2. Now, unfortunately, this, I just gotta go here. So we type in 2,500. This is on a real computer. It generates 6,000 kilograms of CO2. So that's a typical house for a typical year. So if you're heating with natural gas, it's 6,000 kilograms of CO2. If you did it with oil, it'd be about 2,500 liters of oil, and that's a bit more. It's almost 7,000 kilograms of CO2. If you're doing it with electricity, that would use a lot of kilowatt hours, probably 10 times to like 25,000 kilowatt hours for the same amount of energy. And that would generate 425 kilograms of CO2. So you've got 6,000 from natural gas, 400 from electricity. So it makes a big difference, and you can go through the different factors.
Well, do you want questions as you go, or do you want questions as you go?
Sure, yeah.
If I could.
Sure, go ahead, Peter.
So I assume, because you mentioned when you were looking at asphalt versus recycled, they include trucking it and the manufacture. So when we're looking at electricity, they've already included in the towers and the construction. They've done all that equation, and that's the end product. It's
yeah, for it in fact isn't in this model. The convention is just to do it's the end of the pipe implications. Okay. Now for electricity, it's how everything that got into the pipe. So it's the nuclear and solar and natural gas and hydro, and it takes the average of all that.
But not the transmission line.
Well, it's the transmission losses. It's
okay.
Yeah, it's all that, but it's not making the
okay.
lines. So that infrastructure is assumed to be there, like the pipelines are assumed to be there.
Okay.
What isn't in natural gas, for example, it's what's burned, but it's not how much is processing to generate that natural gas. It's not how much methane is exposed into the environment, and it doesn't include that. This model includes some of it to a certain extent. But.
Yeah, Carl.
I just like to also introduce and highlight that we have some members of the town's management team here in attendance as well. Our clerk, manager of economic development and tourism, and public works director are here. Certainly the decisions we make in terms of whether to implement a climate lens they're going to be applicable to a lot of our operations. So I'd like to thank them for sitting in on this conversation as well, but also I think just to keeping, they may have questions as well. So we'll, and Bob Argue, I'm not sure that we've been introduced, so welcome and thank you for joining us. But I'll be keeping an eye on the audience for any questions that may arise, as well as committee questions too. So thank you for that.
Okay, so this one particular chart gives a very quick impression. If you say, okay, you're going to buy a diesel truck, and you can plug in how many diesel units you're going to get, and it'll tell you. Then you can do the comparable electric in terms of energy, and it will give you. The cost is in there too, and it's a general cost, and it's anything in this yellow is configurable. Like you can change those, so you put in your own costs, you put in your own numbers that you want, but it'll tell you what the cost implications are. Then there's the next one is electric vehicles. And it's comparing if you say ICE, which is internal combustion engine, with a battery electric vehicle. And I just did a quick calculation here. Say if Smiths Falls wanted to buy 2 trucks, vehicles, and they averaged, I don't know what they'd average, 200 kilometers a week. Anybody? Anyway, I'll say that each. That would be 20,000 kilometers a year for the 2 trucks. That would generate over 8,000 kilograms of CO2. If they were electric, it would generate 560. So, considerably less. So that's a 7,500 kilogram savings. And there's connections here to websites where you can compare the lifetime cost of conventional vehicles with electric vehicles. So that lets you do a lifetime cost, including maintenance, insurance.
I think Richard has a question.
Oh, yes. I was just thinking about our current policy, and I was just thinking if we were looking to revise it, what were the changes would you recommend with a climate lens perspective?
Well, I mean, really, it's a culture within the municipality is just to consider, does this have an implication? This policy I'm thinking of, or this procurement, and so what is it? So what are the alternatives? Are there alternatives? So you look at the alternatives, and here's the sort of the conventional way, but is there a way that our policy or procurement that will reduce the greenhouse gas? So it's just having that up front in any decision. And the municipalities who are installing in using the climate lens, I mean, it only works if sort of the politicians from the top down and senior management from the top down, understand it and accept it, that's part of their job description now. Not everybody's going to do the number crunching, but if you have one or two people within the corporation who can do that, a lot of it people can just do and then say, hey, can you help with this? So that's, some people are afraid of spreadsheets or, Googling this, and some of it can get complicated. But it's really just a mindset is the key thing, rather than any one suggestion. So I don't know if that answers at all.
It does.
Yeah.
I think we had Peter had one. I think there was a question back as well. Sorry, did you have a question?
No,
I thought I saw your hand go up. Sorry.
No.
Peter?
So the next interactive, which you won't see, but I will, is the space heating one, which, so you see under the gigajoules there, which is now 0. If you put in 90 gigajoules, which is a typical household, then what comes up is it automatically tells you what the impact is for these different kinds of heating. So for natural gas, you'd be using about 2,500 cubic meters of natural gas. Current prices, it would cost a little over $1,000. If you did it with oil, it would use 2,300 liters of oil, and it would cost around $3,000, so much more expensive than natural gas. If you did with electricity, it would be 425 kilograms of CO2 compared to the almost 6,000. But the cost would be around $3,700, so a lot more expensive than natural gas. But if you look there underneath the electricity, you have electricity using a air source heat pump, or electricity with a ground source heat pump. And you can plug in the specific coefficients of performance there, which we're assuming 3 for an air source heat pump. That brings the kilograms of CO2 needed for heating this house down to 140 from the 6,000 of natural gas and that, but it also brings the cost down to $1,200, which is about the same as natural gas. That's under current carbon tax, but if carbon tax goes up, then that would add an additional sort of almost $1,000 savings of the electricity versus the natural gas, which is probably why you're seeing a lot in the news if you're paying attention to heat pumps and why people are going that way, because over the lifetime, compared to natural gas, they're cheaper. And that this can sort of, depending on the configuration of the house, you can do it for a big building. We did it for Lanark Lodge, and the difference in how much money would be saved and that sort of thing.
I think we've got a question here from Peter.
Yeah, just a quick question here. In terms of electricity, because of the carbon content, let's say in Ontario, most of ours is nuclear, hence the carbon content is low. How does it rank, say, compared with Quebec, Ontario's carbon electricity content?
Well, it's a bit higher. Quebec is basically all hydro. And so they have great hydro resources. They've surplus of hydro they sell to the States, and we hope they sell to Ontario. But comparable. I mean, they're very low. Manitoba's very low. But then you go to Alberta and Saskatchewan, then they're fairly high because they're still coal-fired and natural gas electric generators. So it depends on the province, but these figures are specific to Ontario.
Okay, yeah.
So that's a space heating one. There's one that's on solar power, depending on the size of the system and what the cost, what the savings are. There's a little one actually on investments, which is interesting because depending where you invest your money, it can generate either a little or a lot of CO2, depending on how they use the money. And so there are websites out there which you can actually go and say, my $10,000, what kind of carbon impact does that have on society? So that's done. Composting, every kilogram of compost you do removes about 1.5 kilograms of CO2. So that's the more you compost, get things out of the landfill, the better. Recycling, every kilogram of recycling that you increase on average, it saves 2.25 kilograms of CO2. And you can see how that would add up if you've got a, sort of 5,000 households starting to compost or add another kilogram a week of recycling. That makes a huge difference. So there's these little mini studies on light bulbs, fine paper, reducing fine paper, recycling it, local food, the no idling, what kind of impact that can have in the community. And you just put in how many people does your program hope to hit, how many minutes a day would each person reduce, and it'll tell you what the savings are in CO2.
I have a quick question about the local food, if I could. Do you have criteria for what is considered local food?
Well, I mean, the 100 kilometer is the typical one. Here it would be Eastern Ontario, Western Quebec, typically. Most of this data is from a study in Kitchener, and they were using their local area and comparing it to imported food, mainly, USA.
Thank you.
But it's basically
Some of those good cantaloupes.
Yeah.
Lovely road.
Yeah.
Thank you.
No idling, carpooling. How many carpoolers, what's their average trip per week, average kilometers, and then it tells you, what kind of car do they drive, and then it'll tell you. And you can do this for individual, or if you want to develop a program for the community, you put in community-wide numbers, percentages, and it will tell you the whole community. Telework, people not coming in, what kind of savings they can expect. That's kind of it. This is an ongoing process. People suggest new little routines, and we try and do them. One was at one point was air travel. What's the impact of air travel? Which becomes a complicated thing, but it looks at long haul and medium and short haul, and how much you're willing to pay for a ton of greenhouse gas you're offsetting and different trips. So, but anyway, that was just a side. Somebody asked for it, so. So basically, that's it. This you haven't really seen how it works, but maybe what it can do. But as I say, online now, this is really a very fast evolving field that people are now taking the climate lens seriously and providing the tools how to use it properly. But the key thing is, as I say, is actually the culture of the corporation and having people actually think of this.
Thanks. Carl?
So I just have a question, I guess, in terms of how other municipalities implement that and whether this is a lens that's looked at through all municipal decisions or just municipal decisions relating to infrastructure or capital. So like, as an example, last evening, council approved a zoning amendment application for a 36-unit residential complex in a dense area of town, already serviced by existing roads and sewers, and from a sustainability perspective, that's exactly where we want to see development without pushing it out into the suburbs or into greenfield land. But I guess we don't necessarily, the alternative is that council would not approve that development. So in that case, it's probably not going to be carbon neutral development. So there's GHG implications for what we've approved. I'm not sure how that would be accounted for, but I'm also not sure what the alternative. So let's say we didn't approve that development, then somewhere down the road, those 36 units get absorbed through either new housing in a different part of town that's already equally well serviced, or potentially out in a greenfield site that has more of those impacts. But we wouldn't know that until we wouldn't have a direct and obvious comparable to as an alternative. At the end of the day, council can only make a decision based on the application that's filed with them in sort of a binary yes or no decision based on compliance with the official plan. We don't know what the alternative would be. So I think from that, I'm curious as to how that can be accounted for in a climate lens, or if a climate lens would even be applicable to sort of planning decisions or land use decisions like that relate to private property development.
Yeah. In studies by the federal government, municipalities have direct or indirect control or influence on up to 50% of the whole country's climate emissions. So when you think of it, that's extraordinary, what happens. And when you think, your operations are relatively small, and the servicing even is relatively small for these. But land use planning, transportation, type of buildings, codes, all that has potentially major impact. So if you look at how some municipalities would do that new subdivision, they say, well, the biggest climate impact is going to be how is it heated? Hot water, heating, air conditioning. And and roughly what's that going to look like in terms of the carbon footprint of that particular, and then what are some alternatives, ground source heat pumps, electric, whatever. And so you'd look at those. Few municipalities can actually approve or disapprove of something based on that, because that's not acknowledged yet. But some municipalities, Caledon, there's others who have got new planning regulations in place that either strongly encourage, going above beyond code. Some municipalities have the ability to actually have their own code, and so they can actually dictate to a great extent how those buildings are going to be built, and therefore how they're going to perform. So there are a number of different ways, but it's tricky. But there can be, if not outright regulations controlling how they're built and how they're powered, how there's incentives, differential, a scale of development charges, that sort of thing, or trade-offs. So there are mechanisms that a lot of municipalities in Ontario have been exploring and implementing, and very successfully. Mm-hmm. So that's not, you appreciate, that's not an easy process. That's a multi-year to explore that and look at the alternatives.
Absolutely. And I think our climate action plan is going to really assess those and look at both from a policy perspective as well as seeking partnerships. Potentially council may be in position to consider incentives through community improvement plan or any number of tools. I guess just with respect to a climate lens and a zoning decision such as that, where it becomes difficult to sort of evaluate the climate impact of the alternative, I'm just not sure, I guess, wondering how that would happen. So like, as an example, at the zoning stage, I don't know how that building is heated. That becomes, that gets worked out through probably gas, but I can't say for sure. And that gets worked out at a much later stage of the process when we're looking at a building permit application. And certainly we can start developing policies through the next official plan that, like Caledon does, support and encourage, maybe not mandate, but at least kind of highlight and assist in making those decisions. But I think at this stage, how would have a climate lens been used, or if it could be used when looking at a zoning decision for private property?
Yeah, and I don't, under the current setup, it's not going to impact the decision. All it's going to do is say, this is how it's going to impact our climate budget that we have as a community. So, and then there may be mechanisms, soft or hard, that you can adjust that, but that's, the work that's required.
Yeah.
But right now, all the climate lens does is just acknowledge the impact as opposed to control how that impact comes out. That's up to the regulations and council decisions to do the control.
Sean, did you?
Yeah. So just build on that, and I think it's a great example because we don't have, when it comes to council, as of last night, it's a zoning decision, but council still has the authority to make that decision whether we want to approve the zoning or not. And if we applied a climate lens earlier in the process, and the question was to the developer, what is your plan for heating this building, and will you be employing heat pumps or natural gas? And if our staff have the ability to apply that climate lens to the decision-making process, and it comes to committee of the whole last night, and part of the presentation indicates, well, this project will be more climate friendly. We'll be utilizing air source heat pumps, and then we're also acknowledging we're going to provide greater density. We're making some provisions to allow greater density. There's some affordable factors. It could be part of that equation whether council believes this is a suitable development for our community. Mm-hmm. And when we look at our climate action plan for the community-based, and so we look at our emissions, our community-based emissions, if we continue to add new residential units at the pace we're doing, so close to 400 last year, and if all of those are natural gas, we're really fighting a very difficult battle when we're adding to emissions, when we're actually when our objective is to reduce. So I'm interested to learn more about places like if the Caledon has some tools or some policies which would require or strongly encourage the use of more climate-friendly heating systems, then it's something we may want to look at within this group and ultimately bring it to council, because if we're going to have any chance of hitting our targets, we know we have to pretty much stop the use of any more natural gas within our community.
And it's a good point. I mean, the lesson is the earlier you apply a climate lens, or even suggest that you're going to apply a climate lens, then the more, upfront the developers might consider. If you're known as a climate-friendly community, then that gives them, an extra, star on their proposal.
Or as you said, early on, before all the engineering is done to.
Because still most people, they just fall back to the same old tried and true, and that things are changing.
Are we able to bring Sue back to the screen so we can see her in case she has a question?
I think Julia had it.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, through you, Madam Chair. I was just wondering,
Julia, you should probably come up to the mic because this is live stream recorded.
Sorry, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. I just had a question about the bank and how do we develop that bank, and is that through the climate action strategy that we're looking at doing? Like, how do we look at our community as a whole and find out where's our baseline, where are we at now, and what's the appropriate way or the appropriate number to bring that down? That was just my question.
Gosh, did you want to speak to that, or?
I mean, I can tell you how everybody else does it.
Maybe we can start with that.
I mean, and I understand you've probably been looking at the FCM, Partners in Climate Protection, the PCP program. And, and the first step of that, and this is the first step actually to access a lot of government money, is to have your climate action plan. And there's 5 milestones. The first milestone is the inventory. And it's the inventory of the corporate inventory, which is the town direct, and then the community inventory, sort of with the whole community out there, transportation, buildings, industry, and so on. Milestone 2 is setting targets. Milestone 3 is coming up with a plan. 4 is implementing, and 5 is analysis. But anyway, getting to 3 is a very good step. Yeah. It's a formalized plan anyway.
Madam Chair, whoops,
Yes, so go
sorry,
ahead.
I wanted to follow up on the issue that the mayor and Carl had raised in terms of development application. So in the county climate action plan, we have now integrated the intentions for green building standards. And there are many municipalities across the province that are adopting green building standards. And certainly that will be something I'll be recommending for Smiths Falls. But we could start right away. The town of Carleton Place actually has sort of a checklist that it shows to developers. And it's completely voluntary, but it's an expression of the wishes of the council that those developers, choose to follow this. So that's something that we could do. It's not an imposition right away, but it is an education process and laying out where the intentions are.
Thanks, Sue. Did you want? Through you, Madam Chair, supplemental to that, I'm just wondering, in terms of timeline and cost, in order to develop something like that, how long does it usually take, and what's the average cost around that?
Average, it's usually it's a 2-year program. I think it can be very fast tracked depending on access to information. How much does it cost? I'm not sure about that because in the past, FCM has provided up to 80% of the funding for it. And that's allowed to hire either consultant or staff. The preference is if you can do it in staff and have in-house expertise working on it. So Sue's probably better at answering this question than I am, having sort of.
Did you want to add?
Yeah,
to that?
and I can't address the actual cost except to say that this committee has already embarked on that process. Richard is in the process of collecting some of that data for Milestone 1. And, in terms of a time commitment, certainly Milestone 1 should be achieved within a matter of a few months, basically. Milestone 2 is very fast, provided that's the setting of the targets, provided that council is generally on board with something. And then milestone 3 can be more challenging in terms of coming up with all of the intentions. But, a couple of years at most. The county has taken longer than that. I'd say they probably have now taken 2.5 years, close to 3 years, to get that plan in place. Does that help?
Yeah, good. Okay, any other questions for Bob? No? Yes, Sean?
Bob, I want to really appreciate this. I've seen it before, and it's just as fascinating the second time through it, and so deeply meaningful. But for a municipality to implement climate lens, which I'm hoping we do, I'm optimistic we will, it's the staff training. Because every time the staff would complete a report, they're going to have to apply the climate lens to that and try to determine what is the positive, negative climate impact of a decision when it comes to council. So is there training available to once a municipality implements a policy, or how does everyone get on board and effective quickly?
Yeah, this is a good point. So far, the municipalities, I've been doing the training, basically just coming and talking to whatever staff and going through, and working out the climate lens and how it works. The secret behind it is don't sweat the big stuff. Just start and do it, and just as I say, start basic. Just does this have an impact? Is it a big or a small impact? Can we quantify it? Well, not right now, but, we think it's like this. That's good enough at this stage, and very quickly you can start refining it using this tool, other online tools. But I'd be pleased to,
I didn't want to put you on the spot and ask you, but you offered, so. Okay,
I'm more than happy.
That's super.
to do that, so.
Great, thank you.
I have a question too, because there's such great content here. It's very helpful to see all the different pieces of the mini tools and all of that content. And I'm thinking there's a lot of information here that could be very helpful in improving climate literacy with the public, as well as with like internally training. That's great. But I think also for the public to learn about that as well. So is that something that you've seen done? Is that a tool like this, like pieces of it being shared with the public to try and show?
Well, properly following the FCM process of developing a climate action plan requires public consultation of some kind, and that's public education as well as consultation. So yeah, that's essential. You have to do that, if you want this to fly in the community and, be more than a report sitting somewhere. So yeah, that's very important.
Great. Because I could see people trying to plug in their numbers and see how things are getting impacted. So
yeah, we've had open houses where, people can just come and say, oh, here's I have to get a new heating system. I've heard about this, but that's where something like this or network planners concierge program really comes.
Yes.
great.
So I would just add, sorry, Madam Chair, that we are doing that a bit in the Climate Concierge program. And it's a great place for anybody to start is with the personal, the home stuff. Play with those numbers, and then you start to see the application to the larger institutions or community.
That's great. Thank you. And Sean?
So I guess, so I think it's what's the next step? And if I'm correct in presuming that the committee would, I guess, maybe pass a resolution recommending that staff prepare a report for Committee of the Whole for the development of a climate lens policy for the town. Does that sound like a reasonable step forward?
I shall so move.
You guys moved?
Yeah.
I think Carol has something to say.
Yep.
Yeah, so I think certainly I'll welcome direction from the committee. Just to quickly address it at sort of at the staff and the administration level, the climate lens has been introduced to the management team. We've discussed it at a couple of the senior management meetings. So certainly this discussion here we welcome very, very much, and I would I'll welcome the committee's direction and pondering, I guess, how that's going to be conveyed to council. I would imagine as staff, I'm going to be looking to provide some some implementation considerations to council along with the recommendation. Like as an example, I think the climate budget that was an interesting topic, and I'm glad that we're discussing that. But I would wonder then, and I'll pose that for consideration, by the time once we've established through milestones 1 and 2 what our emissions targets are, and we have that goal that we've set for a defined period of time in the future, would that be the appropriate time to launch the climate lens once we actually know what we're achieving, and I guess once we have the ability to establish a budget that we wouldn't have at this particular instant in time before we've completed milestones 1 and 2. So I'll pose that for consideration.
I see Sue moving her head left to right, so I'd like to hear what she has to say.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'd say start now. There's nothing lost in just playing with it now. There really isn't. In terms of an expectation to have results from staff in the reports to council, set that out a little while. I don't know, 3 months or something like that. Let people have opportunity to play and learn. But yeah, don't wait.
Yeah, Peter.
Just, I think what the motion is just for the staff to create the report. So if you come back in a couple of months or whatever with a report to council, probably drafted here, it could be just one department starts, you know, and you phase it in. Like it doesn't have to be a whole organization. If there's a manager that's ready, that really is keen on it, and there's a lot of let's say low-hanging fruit in their department, I'd start there and build it out, you know, as we go. So I'm not expecting everything at once.
So is that, I wonder, two different things. There's the using the tool to help add additional information to reports or anything that, any of the work that you might be presenting versus an actual formal climate lens that's implemented. Like I almost hear two different things. Yes, Sean?
Well, I guess if maybe it's a matter of bringing it back here first.
Yeah.
And so if staff can put together a policy and how we would apply the climate lens, and possibly even phasing in as to Peter's suggestion, bring it back here for discussion in the next couple of months.
Peter?
Our strategic plan for 2023-2026 says create policies to ensure climate and environmental sustainability is applied to infrastructure projects. So if we started with that one, because it's already approved by council, and then build it out. But I'll wait to staff to come back with ideas, but
I think as an example, like, well, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Like as an example, fairly early on, like we'll obviously harmonize a municipal approach, but as an example, early on in development services reports, we can add a section or commentary either in council reports or committee reports that just create a little bit of commentary that's at least thinking about it. So we may not have that climate budget established, but at least we're thinking about it. So for instance, if we have a zoning amendment application, rather than just embedding potentially some commentary on climate as it relates to the official plan policy, potentially there's that evaluation of an impact and an assessment, even if we don't have any raw data or wrong numbers. So that as an example could be a start, a transition before we start formalizing an approach across the board. And I'm just thinking out loud. We'll have that conversation internally at our end, but I think there's certainly some value in getting sort of driving home the importance of introducing this subject as part of our evaluation criteria when we're looking at decisions.
Could I throw in here also, Madam Chair?
Yeah.
Sorry. It's there's room to be opportunistic too. And so a number of other municipalities are looking at or purchasing electric vehicles. And that's a great place to start in terms of applying the climate lens. And I suspect you're probably in your budget process right now. So is that an area where could start with starting to apply it, especially with the grants that are available from the county for EVs and chargers, and from the feds for chargers too.
we're well underway. We've purchased some electric vehicles already and we're looking to get more. I'm thinking about our new water tower, $24 million project. What is the impact on developing that monster project? And is there a way now that we can reduce that impact? Anyways, it's fun.
Yeah, can impact so many
Fun,
things.
Bob.
Thank you so much, Bob, for sharing all that with us.
Thank you. So to go back, I guess, to the action, maybe you don't need a resolution, just need, I guess, a direction from the committee to develop a climate lens policy and bring it back here for review and consideration.
Yeah, I think that would. So what I'm hearing then is we'll The next stop will be back to this group with an assessment of some implementation options and considerations, and then we can refine that, take that back to management, and take that to council.
We know there's good examples out there we can lean on.
Mhm.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Bob. I appreciate your time.
That was great.
Thank you, Bob.
We'll be in touch as staff have some direction from the committee, and we'll be in touch as to help fulfill that direction with some follow-up questions for you in the next little while.
Okay,
Thank you so much.
good luck, all.
Thanks, Bob.
Merry Christmas.
Thanks, Bob.
Okay. So did we want to go back to the vegetation
Yes.
retention policy
I-
discussion?
Yeah, and I do have to leave shortly, if we can at least get that through. Too.
I do as well.
Okay. So did we have, I think, or did you have any comments on that one further?
On that one?
On the vegetation one, or are we?
It was Carl finished the presentation?
I did.
Yeah. I guess I don't mind starting. I certainly would like to see the town implement at least a policy which refers to at least the urban tree removal and the clear cutting. Those are the two which are probably the biggest concern to me. And when I think of if we were sitting here 5 years ago and had this policy in place, and all the development we've seen in the last 5 years that led to clear cutting of all the land, and I appreciate that makes it much easier for the developer. But if a policy was in place to maintain mature trees over a certain size, these trees wouldn't be the barren lands. Sorry, these developments would be the barren lands that they are today. And I know looking back at pictures of the town from 100 years ago or 100 plus, there wasn't very many trees around. But I don't think it's because they were cutting trees down for development, because they were cutting them down for firewood. So anything that was standing was gone. But when we see a great tree canopy today, and I think we have a municipal role to try and help preserve that. And I don't think we have a problem necessarily with people cutting down trees on their private property. I think most people want to maintain mature trees and recognize the value of that. But I still think it's important to have a policy and some reason to pause if somebody does decide they want to. But the clear cutting, I mean, we're still building homes and apartment buildings, and if there's an opportunity, and as commercial opportunity to preserve more trees, I think we need a policy around that. How restrictive, what kind of fines could apply, et cetera, is something we need to develop. But I think we need something.
I agree, and I like the comment that you made about reaching out to other municipalities who've done different types of policies and implemented them, and learning from what's worked and what hasn't, where have the challenges been, to see what the feasibility of it is too, because I hadn't thought of the which I should have, but the fact that clear cutting, if you put in a regulation and there's a fine, that's not a big deal for the the company that is willing to pay for the cost of it, then we're not having the impact that maybe we're hoping to. So are there lessons learned about how to do that successfully? I think that would be very helpful.
Is there some way to make it easier for them to keep the trees?
Yeah.
And that's, I guess, comes down to construction practices and things that are perhaps could even be beyond our ability to control, but I'd certainly like to explore that.
Madam Chair, could I suggest, and I respect that this is more time on your part, Carl and Richard, but to connect with the Intact Center for Climate Resilience at the University of Waterloo. They may well have some good information about other municipalities that are taking stronger protections, and particularly around the notion of protecting against flooding. And so we know that trees, tree roots, wetlands, all of that stuff, protect against flooding, and particularly mature trees, right? So I don't know that they do, but I think that would be a really good place to start. And they might actually also, because they are supported by the insurance industry, they might have some dollar values applied to that too, which you could then turn around and figure out the fine value
Great.
or the argument to the developer.
Yeah, the funding is always helpful.
I mean, and I guess turning to staff, turning to Carl in particular, is this something that you can see staff having the capacity to put together in the coming months?
I think that's possibly, but we'll have to sort of work on the planning services will be undertaking some work planning this week to sort of assess our priorities for the first couple of months in 2024. So we'll be looking at that among a couple of other projects. But we recognize that this is something that's been on the table to some extent for quite some time, and certainly is coherent with the work that we're looking at with the official plan and climate protection group. So I certainly don't want to commit a deadline, commit a certain time at this point, but if this is something the committee feels is important and council would certainly like to direct us on that, then we can make that priority.
Yeah, Madam Chair, just want to make a comment. I think once this is done, the recommendations and so on, perhaps we should share that with neighboring municipalities. The reason being that, if I'm a developer, I couldn't do that here. Oh, there's another municipality that can easily do it. And if we can share what we have, the value, why we do that. So flag that right back so that to make the playing field equal.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay.
Just a little concerned that we, at each meeting, add something as
Yeah.
opposed to, thought we might get to the end with a set of recommendations. And I know Sue keeps telling me we can walk and chew gum at the same time. Staff can do that. And so I'm fine with Carl coming back and pushing back and saying, no, I'll get it, but it'll be June. It won't be January or something. You won't hurt our feelings.
I appreciate that.
No.
So I was just letting my 4 o'clock know that I'm going to be a couple of minutes. My 4:30, I'll be a couple of minutes late. But yes, I think ultimately staff will need direction from council as to which approach to take. But there will be some background work that we will have to do beforehand to sort of assess the broader implications of what each of these reports would be, so that council has enough information to give us the best direction they can. But yeah, I think it's fair to say that that likely will be closer to the second quarter of 2024 when this comes forward. I think there is at this particular point in time, there's a bit of a glut in projects in terms of getting our official plan up and running, the Heritage Conservation District up and running, and a few other community improvement plan launched for next year. So there are a few other pieces, but we certainly want to get some traction on this and get some direction from the committee and from council within the next first half of 2024, if possible.
And I do have to excuse myself. I've got 40 kids waiting for pizza. So I don't want tearing down walls or anything.
Oh, we will.
Okay. Thanks.
I'll just apologize too. I don't mean for any of my suggestions to stop action. So I'm not offended if somebody tells me no, not happening. Anyway, okay.
I need to bow out as well.
Okay, thank you, Carl.
All right, thank you very much.
Appreciate it. So I think the next one was the draft downtown core design guidelines update. Richard, were you?
Yes, I have
Share
some
that?
time. So this year, staff, well, myself, have revised the downtown core design guidelines from 2014. And the intent is really to create a more cohesive framework so that landowners and developers who wish to develop in a downtown have an understanding of how to best complement the surrounding environment and also improve it. So the sustainability design principles as a part of the guidelines are part of the design principles that form the foundation that the guidelines are built on. So the reason for bringing it to the committee today was so that the committee can have a chance to review the guidelines and utilize the sustainability lens to improve the design considerations for parts of the guidelines.
Okay.
Yes, and I would be looking for comments no later than the 22nd of December.
Any thoughts on that?
So
Yes.
if I'm clear, you have a draft here for us.
That's right.
And you're using this like a focus group with our climate lens brain on.
Yes.
Take a look at these and
Yes.
offer any feedback, advice.
Anything that doesn't look right to you, say, you know what, I actually.
Here's an opportunity or, all right.
If something's missing, if it's not clear, if you think that the considerations are not realistic or hard to understand, let me know.
And we don't need just our climate
No.
lens hat on. We could,
Of course, if you have other lenses that are appropriate, by all means.
and you want it as a Christmas present.
I'd love that.
22nd.
I would love that. I would. Yeah.
22nd. All right.
Mhm.
Or we
Great.
can give it to council as a New Year's gift.
Exactly. That's the goal. That's the goal, anyways.
I might have to ask for some help with that.
No worries.
Yeah, and may I also
Wow.
suggest this is a great document,
Oh,
but
thank
it
you.
needs time to digest.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of
And,
content.
You know, if it's feasible, maybe for a document of this size, can we have it earlier? When ready?
Sure.
In the future.
In the future,
Yes. In the future, there'll be more time for review, unfortunately.
That's great. Thank you.
Wow.
Do you have something you wanted to say, Sue? I didn't.
No, I'm sorry. I was just expressing wow over the document. That's all.
Okay. So I think the next item is under project updates, grant monitoring. Richard did
Yes. So.
back up to the podium again, getting your exercise.
A little bit, yes. So the ORCA grant, the Ontario, what is it now? Ontario. The Ontario Resource Community, I can't remember the name of the organization, but ORCA.
Okay.
We've applied for a staff capacity program. And so the intent is that if we're successful, they'd be helping us review portions of the climate action plan for milestone 2.
Oh, great.
So we'll hear back by the 15th of December. It will be, I guess, a day after this, well, the end of the week essentially. And we will know if we were successful in getting the grant, the staff capacity grant. So essentially, whenever we're reviewing portions of the climate action plan for milestone 2, they'll be helping with that, with adding a resiliency lens.
Great.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions or? That's great. Let's hope we get the money.
Hopefully. It's not really, so should
For the
clarify.
person.
Yeah, so what it is that we're applying for their staff time. So there's no money attached to this.
Well, it's savings of your time.
Yes, exactly.
Which is good. That's good. Since we're demanding so much of you.
And just in terms of staff time and that sort of thing, I think the summer student funds are opening very soon, aren't they? Like right after Christmas, sort of thing. Is that something that? I mean, I'm sure the town is looking at those, but
Indian summer job thing?
Yes.
The deadline is January the 10th. Yeah. It's now opened.
Okay, it's open now
yeah,
for
okay.
summer students.
So is that something? Yes.
I'm just going to say, as Carl was saying earlier, planning staff are doing work planning tomorrow. Part of that discussion is actually what we're hoping that a summer student will do this summer. So I can flag, sorry, not tomorrow, but Thursday. So I can flag that for discussion as part of that work planning discussion for 2024.
Perfect.
Super. Great.
Yeah. More hands on deck. That'd be great. Okay, so do we want to move to the round table updates, discussion? Sue, did you want to start us off?
I do have one item, if you don't mind. So coming out of the last meeting, Climate Network Lanark prepared an alternative resolution and a letter that we've sent out to all of the municipalities in Lanark County and Smith Falls, asking councils to endorse and forward. And this was in response to a resolution request from Enbridge, asking municipalities to endorse the gas expansion and to submit to the Ministry of Energy's consultation. And so effectively what we did in our alternative resolution was ask municipalities to endorse the concept of putting electric heat pumps on the same footing as natural gas, and asking the provincial government, in fact, to do better or a cost calculation in terms of affordability for people, so that natural gas is not the only thing under consideration. So I know that that went into Smith Falls. I don't know where it may stand. And I don't know if it's come forward or...
Last night, the council considered the letter from Enbridge. We didn't have a comparable letter yet last night. Would it? So, and I think pretty clearly we did not endorse the Enbridge proposal last night. And no, I don't recall seeing the alternative, but that could still come forward. It's probably maybe in the pipeline.
Okay. How can I check on that, Peter?
I would go through the clerk, or Mary could probably ask.
Sorry, Sue. So I actually do believe that it was on as a correspondence item on last evening's agenda. So it may have just been overlooked because it wasn't a priority item. But yes, Peter is correct. If for some reason you don't see it on the town's website under the council calendars attached to the agenda, you should be able to reach out to Carrie Costello, our clerk, and ask where that's at.
I'm just looking for last night's.
Yeah, just
Yeah, Peter?
Chair, just to follow up on Peter's comment. We recently, actually last week, we have a Zoom presentation on heat pumps. And I was talking to, prior to that, I was talking to one, actually the owner of Modern Times. She actually installed a heat pump last fall and was on propane, and she has been monitoring how much money she's saving. And it was significant. In fact, I invited her to take part in that presentation so we can share the information. Unfortunately, she has another meeting already scheduled. So, but definitely that was a testimony of how much you actually save on your heat pumps than just on propane. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's an important message, I think.
Yeah.
So, and I don't mean to belabor it here, but if it was in correspondence last night and wasn't addressed, then can it still be brought forward? Sorry.
Was it from Tay Valley?
Tay Valley have sent a draft or a template that could be used for a report on it. They sent that around. Rob Rayner sent that around.
Sorry, and was that on your, sorry, that?
It was in reference to our resolution and our request. Yeah.
Okay. So that was, it was, but we spent most of the time talking about Enbridge's request. We didn't get to the alternative.
Okay.
It could come back quite easily.
Yeah.
To council.
Okay. So I'll check with Carrie then and see if it can come back, or
Well, I
is
will.
there? Yeah.
But,
Thank
yeah.
you so much, Peter.
Curious,
I just unclear about process with some of that stuff.
Okay, so it sounds like Peter and Mary are on top of it.
Yeah, I'm already on.
Got it done.
Internet connection.
Everything's working now. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. Is that it for your update then?
Yes, it is for the moment. Yep.
Yeah, just something to share roundtable wise. We're glad to see Carl's report to council, because at this point here, Rio and the town is working to bring the first mini forest to town. Now, what it is usually when you plant a forest, a tree and so on, you plant it a meter apart at least. But this one here is within a meter square, we plant 3 trees. So we would be able to get the trees close together, different variety, native species, and the closeness of them actually force them to grow fast to capture the sunlight. And an application has been made to Tree Canada for funding. And a potential site has been proposed.
Do we know where that is, or?
This is on Chamber Street area, yeah.
Okay.
What's that park called?
Corbett Park.
Right. Yeah. So that's one. Then switching from Rio to Rio Roundtable. We have I've mentioned before something about biochar, and we have been working with a commercial firm that has now been clearing the remaining of the storms and so on with this carbonatum that can process 20 tons of biomass in a day. And from that, you can capture 1 ton of carbon.
Wow.
Sequestered. And we call those biochar, and when you treat it with fungi, you actually have turned it into a soil enricher. And as well, there's now a company in Quebec that is looking into certifying this as part of carbon credit. And that same company is also, at this point, applying for a project in Vermont, US, to use biochar as a reclamation for brownfield. Okay. And also locally, the person in charge of biochar for Roundtable, Nate Morris, has applied to become a member of the committee. The letter is in, I don't know whether it's got to you yet.
It goes to the clerk.
Okay, correct. And along that line, he and his wife just recently published a book called Carbon in the Garden. And it's now available in Amazon, both in print and in ebook. It's small, 79 pages, but it's all the key things are there. If you want to get it quickly, the e-version costs under $7 Canadian. Okay. So that's my, one other thing. If Nate can join the committee,
The delegate or a guest?
No, if council approves, okay, there's a request because he has to, he would like to see whether we could change the meeting time from 3 o'clock to 2:30 to 3:30.
What was the reason why we selected 3? There was something about conflicts.
Steve was.
Sorry, I was going to say through the chair, it was just, it was basically a discussion of this group. If membership changes, I would suggest that this group try to be open to a change of meeting date or time, just on that basis, so that we can try to accommodate a quorum of members regularly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sounds good. I seem to recall we were trying to accommodate one member and most people were flexible. So
Yes.
that makes sense.
Yeah.
It can be really tricky too, full-time jobs or children who are getting off the bus.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yes, so if
Yeah.
we receive new members, especially with, just as, I guess I can update now in terms of roundtable, if it's
Yes.
all right with Madam Chair, the changes to the Climate Protection Working Group, terms of reference was endorsed by Cal last night, so it can move forward to council. So that means that terms of reference for this committee are changing to add 2 youth membership participants.
Great.
So
Great.
just acknowledging as there's a little bit of an evolution with our membership, that there may need to be changes with our meeting date and time to try to accommodate a quorum of members.
Sounds good. And I'll add to the whole membership discussion as well. So Joanne DeZormo is a public health nurse at the health unit, and she is the one that's filling the position for the other half of Lanark. So her and I cover the municipalities in Lanark. And so Joanne is Town of Smiths Falls, Montague, Drummond, North Elmsley, and Beckwith. So having said that, the plan is that I'm going to step down, and Joanne has already applied to become a member. So we're going to try and make sure there's always going to be one of us here. I'm not going to run away until I know for sure she's got a place to come to. But yeah, so Joanne's going to be supporting the group, hopefully, if she's approved by council.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
and we'll be working closely together because I'll be at Tay Valley and Perth and Carlton Place and Mississippi Mills and
The loop.
joining forces and collaborating, hopefully.
Danielle finally has some people to work with.
Yes. Can't tell you how happy I am about that.
A little question there, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Is either one of you assigned to the county?
We both kind of are. It depends on the issue. Like I have been typically, but yeah, the intention is we have 2 nurses north and 2 south, like 2 Lanark and 2 Leeds Grenville, and that we can support each other with the county work. And it might be that Joanna's working on a lot of a topic area in multiple municipalities. And so if that topic area comes up with the county, she may be more knowledgeable and she might be better suited to work with them on that, and vice versa.
'Cause I would certainly suggest that somehow or another you get on the list of attendees for the county climate committee.
Yeah, and the other thing about that I wanted to explore, I might want to talk to you afterwards too, but we do have I'm not a health promotion specialist role, who also played a big role in some of the work that we do with commenting on plans and all that sort of thing. And Joe was the one, not this Joe, it's another Joe. Joe was the one that commented on the climate action plan for the county. And so we probably want to also gauge who is best for that, but we are a small but mighty team. So I don't think, I don't think it'll be too far from any of our tables. We'll be well informed and covering for each other. But that was definitely something that we noticed in the plan, though, was that the health unit was not listed as a group that they were wanting to have as a member. So I didn't know the ability to participate in that or to request to become a member of that. Do you know? Is there?
I don't know formally, no, but I could guess. So yeah, we could have an offline talk about that for sure. Yeah.
Sounds good. Thank you. Peter, did you have anything? No? Mary, Richard, any other?
It's been good.
I can add, this is more applicable to the next item on the agenda, but I just want to add that as part of tonight's agenda, I suggested that our next meeting in January be 1 week later than our usual monthly meeting. And that's just to accommodate some of the committee meeting shifts that's going to happen in January because staff are returning from holidays on January 2nd. So there's quite, we have what we call a skeleton crew that's in between Christmas and New Year, but many staff will be gone over the holidays. So that's just for that. And if there's any conflict, if you could please let me know if January 16th doesn't work for anyone, and I will do my best to accommodate.
All right.
I can tell you right now, it's not good for me at all. Sorry.
16th, isn't it?
It's Tuesday, I think.
Well, I will note that, Sue. At this point, we aim for quorum. So if there's a quorum of members, the meeting can proceed.
Yep.
Yeah, if I'm on the committee, I think I'm available.
We'll see.
And if I'm on, I am available.
Thank you, ladies.
I like that.
Motion.
Okay, motion to adjourn. Okay, Peter?
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. While we close down, I just want to wish everyone a Merry Christmas, a safe and happy New Year. And if I don't see you in the new year, Danielle, I wish you luck.
Thank you. It's been such a pleasure. I've told her.
Yes, absolutely. For the short-lived time, I guess.
But it's such a good community to work with and
Yes.
Great.
stuff. And